This is Inside the Right. So Tim, it looks like Kamala Harris just took the biggest thing Donald Trump had going for him. So yesterday, he held this big press conference at his New Jersey golf course where he discussed all the ways in which Americans' costs were too high and gave no specific policies to actually fix any of that stuff. At one point, he was asked for a policy and he straight up said, just vote for me and I'll fix it. Kamala Harris then held a rally the immediate next day and gave specific detailed plans on how to lower costs. So basically everything that Trump was seeking to do, but she actually backed up how she would do it. Does this just completely deflate Donald Trump in his effort to drive this campaign home?
Yeah, Trump just can't execute on a message right now. And, he's always struggled with this, but you can tell he's particularly flummoxed right now and flustered and grasping for things. And he's aggrieved about Kamala. And that's why, he has this thing at Bedminster. First, it's pretty weird. Let's just say it's pretty weird to hold a costs are too high for working people press conference at a fancy golf club. All right, like that's
Yeah.
not good like optics as a political person. But I don't think he likes to leave his house right now. Like he's been at one of his two houses for like 2 straight weeks. So he has it at Bedminster. And the team, he's got a couple competent people around him, set up this fancy thing. It's like, here's the Cheerios and here's the eggs and here are the things, it's all these little household items that have gotten more expensive, right? So it's obvious what they want him to talk about. And he just can't do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
A, because he doesn't have any plans to fix that. His only economic plan that is different from hers is a massive tariff that will raise costs on all these things,
Right.
right? So
And I
it's
think
like he doesn't.
he had actually announced that he would double the tariff that he was initially considering from 10 to 20%, which would mean costs would be double as high as they would have initially.
Exactly. So part of the reason why he can't drive this message is because he doesn't have a policy plan that would do anything to alleviate costs. The other reason is he's just personally incapable of it. And he's so upset at Kamala that like he can't help himself but spend 20 minutes complaining that she called him weird and that Time Magazine's cover
Yeah.
picture of her was too pretty and all these other things, right? So the message gets totally lost and he doesn't drive anything. Then you have Kamala today driving a very clear message, a brisk message. She only mentions him to basically to troll him for not being able to talk about a message. Like she is like, Donald Trump gave an economic speech. What was that? Like that was like the only thing that she mentioned about him, really. And then she gave her plan, which is good politics. Some of the policies, you have to remember I'm a former Republican, are just so for me.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it was,
that's fair.
but
That's
it's a
fine.
good
That's why we
politics and
that's
it's
why
a
we do
clear
this. That's
agenda.
yeah, and that's why we do the series. And look,
Yeah.
the point here is not to agree about everything. That's okay. It's that is what building this coalition is about. Let me ask you this: as a Democrat, our Achilles heel is that we love plans. Like I'd love to dive into a 16-page policy proposal about childcare. Not going to work on the campaign trail. That is like the polar opposite of what messaging should be. And to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's credit, they're learning the value of short, pithy, effective messages. But is it going to matter for the audience that Donald Trump or Kamala Harris are vying for that when they're saying relatively similar things, that it's clear Donald Trump has no way to execute and doesn't actually know what he's talking about versus the fact that Kamala does? Are we in a political environment where that actually counts for something?
I think so, and especially as long as the Democrats stay on the path that they're on. You're absolutely right. The Elizabeth Warren, I have a plan for that thing. Whether you like her or hate her, or like her plans or hate her plans, it's not a winner politically outside of like elite Democratic circles, right? That's good for you if you're in a primary in a blue state with a lot of college educated Democrats. Everywhere else, like just it bogs things down. So I think the fact that Kamala Harris has laid out some pretty simple agenda items that people can grasp onto, right? We're going to build more houses. We're going to try to make housing more affordable. We're taking prescription drug costs down. We just did that, by the way. I think it helps that they had that rollout. I guess it was yesterday with Biden and Harris talking about the 10 drugs that now they've negotiated down through Medicare. So they have a
Yeah.
proof point. So, it's like, hey, here are the three things we're going to do. We're worried about costs. We just showed you we can do it. We're going forward now. There are a few more things that we should be doing. We realize that you have some concerns about costs. And over there, you got this guy that's a rambling mess, right? Like if it wasn't for Trump, even as bad of a politician as Ron DeSantis is, if you had Ron DeSantis on the other side, it might not feel as effective, right? You're playing to more to a draw, right? Because DeSantis would be doing the same thing, but with just different policies. When you're going against Trump, I think having some basic policies that people can grasp onto, saying you have an ability to do it, versus cuckoo crazy pants, Like that, I think can have some efficacy with some of the remaining, voters that they need to get.
Do you think Donald Trump, even trying to drill down on the issue of high costs, is when he holds these press conferences, he gets so muddled in everything else, in all of his other talking points and all the other shiny things that distract him, and he always ends up making these unforced errors that overshadow the whole point of what the press conference is supposed to be about? I'm sure he didn't go into his Mar-a-Lago press conference a couple days back intending to have the notion that his January 6th insurrection crowd was bigger than Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech crowd, that was the issue that he wanted to present to the American people. Do you think that that this is ultimately going to hurt him, the fact that even if he tries to drill down on what he may perceive as an effective message, high cost, that because he's such a poor messenger, it's ultimately going to redound to his political disadvantage by continuing to put himself out in front of the American people as such an incompetent messenger, as such a not disciplined messenger?
I do think so. And look, think about his high watermark besides like that week after the debate, right? But besides that, like was when he was in court, right? Like that's when his polls were the best because he wasn't out there delivering a message. And so, these press events are not doing anything for him, right? What he needs to do, and I'm not really here to give Donald Trump advice, but like what the smart people around Donald
Well,
Trump
actually, no. I mean, this is a good point. I mean, you are coming from a Republican perspective. So what's happening behind the scenes in terms of what they're probably telling him to do?
Yeah. What they want him to do is they need to bring up Kamala Harris, what we call negatives in politics. When you get a poll and you're like, hey, what do you think about this politician? Do you have a favorable opinion or an unfavorable or neutral? Like, what you're trying to do to your opponent is get that unfavorable number to go up. And so the parlance is like, we want to get up their negatives. Kamala's negatives are pretty low right now. And so you want him out there trying to tie her to inflation. That was a lot easier when it was Biden, right? Tie her
Right.
to the things that people don't like. It's her fault that your grocery bills are up, right? Like that's what they want him to do. Or, come up with other things they might not like about her. She, was letting criminals free or like keeping the border open or, like all those
Right.
traditional things. You can't
All the
trust her.
usual buzzwords. Right.
Yeah, you can't trust. She's a flip flop. Whatever it is, he wants to find something that can get into people's minds, who are still developing an impression of her, right? Like that's not going to work with Democrats. It's not going to work with people that like her. But among the people that have kind of liked this rollout and that have felt like it's positive, but don't really know her that well yet, you want to define her negatively. So that's what they were trying to do yesterday with the Bedminster thing. It just isn't landing because he's all over the place and he's not
Yeah.
he's not delivering any coherent, clear message like he did, I think, pretty effectively, really, with Hillary and Biden. Even if it was BS, at least he had a message frame that he was capable of focusing on.
And by the way, I think that's why it was so important that you want to talk about a contrast here. When Donald Trump first introduced J.D. Vance at the RNC, I mean, he
Yes.
spent a few seconds talking about him before ultimately diving into some 25-minute diatribe, filleting himself over his assassination attempt, doing a bunch of random acknowledgments, and then doing his usual stump speech where he talked about Hannibal Lecter and dead birds and windmills. And he kind of left this vacuum because he was so unwilling to share any spotlight with J.D. Vance. He left an entire vacuum to be filled by the left. And that's exactly what the left did. The left wasted no time. And it's a target-rich environment with J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
But because he didn't opt to define him, because he can't stand having the spotlight off of him for more than 5 seconds, he left that opening to the left. And now he is a total weirdo and creep who called rape
Yes.
inconvenient. And I mean, all of he's the least popular vice presidential candidate in modern American history. You look at what Kamala Harris did when she first introduced Tim Walz. I believe that was the Philadelphia rally, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, and she spent all of this time on stage immediately defining somebody who 71% of Americans had no clue who he was. And she defined him as a rural American, a Midwesterner, a football coach, a teacher, a union guy. And she hit that point over and over and over again. And she's done press with him, just videos, straight up just talking. This was a new campaign video that was released over the last 24 or 48 hours, just them sitting there and talking so we can get to know these people. But because she spent all of this time not allowing Republicans to fill some vacuum and define Tim Walz for them, but instead doing it herself and defining him in a way that would be more virtuous, more beneficial to the Democratic Party and that ticket. Now we're looking at somebody in Tim Walz who has very high approval numbers, the highest of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Kamala Harris, or Tim Walz, and that's because they use that rare opportunity, that sliver of time, that moment in time where people still didn't know him and instead defined him immediately as opposed to letting the other side do it for them.
Yeah, the J.D. Vance is the best example of going back to your previous question about like what are Republicans trying to do? What is Trump trying to do to Kamala? He's trying to do what Democrats did to J.D. Vance, like
Right.
very, very well, adeptly, right? J.D. Gets announced as the VP, and immediately it's like, bam, childless cat ladies. You think, women have to carry their rapist child to term, and you're
Yeah.
weird. And it's
Yeah.
just like, boom, and the stuff was sticky, and people kept talking about it, and it's had the benefit of being true, right? Like, and so JD got defined, like his negatives, shot up in ways that people could like remember very easily. Trump traditionally has been kind of good at that. And let's just be honest, like crooked Hillary, I was a victim of it. Low energy Jeb, right? Like he's like traditionally been good at that. He just hasn't been able to land on Kamala. Part of it, I think, has been the good campaign Kamala's run. Part of it is just maybe he's getting older. Maybe it's PTSD. I think he's just pissed, like, and it's scattered because he's pissed that she's getting so much more attention. Just this combination of things has prevented him from doing what they want to do, which is essentially what the Democrats did to JD effectively.
Right. And it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon
Not
as
next week.
not
The
next week.
convention.
With the
Yeah.
convention and with Kamala Harris continuing to stay on message, with her continuing to remain ascendant in the polls, garner more donations, garner more endorsements, Donald Trump will just continue to dissemble and things will get worse from here. So we'll be here for it. With that said, Tim, your perspective is super valuable, especially as we get into this moment where we have to build this coalition from left to right. We're not going to be able to do it just Democrats alone. It is going to take an entire coalition of pro-democracy Republicans, independents, and Democrats. So your voice is especially important here. So for folks watching right now, if you want to lift up the voice of Tim and his colleagues over at The Bulwark, which is a great outlet, please make sure to subscribe to their YouTube channel. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.